Hey everybody, welcome, come on in. We got a lot of stuff to cover tonight, and I'm gonna really try to take my time and go over the information. I hope you have your notebook ready to take notes, ready to ask questions. And I'm excited to give y'all this information for sure. Welcome. This is our very first class of trauma, depression, and coping skills. And I'm Dr. Ebony. I'm a licensed psychologist, and I'm your professor for the next 6 weeks. So for this mini semester, and we're going to be talking tonight about trauma, intro to trauma, intro to functional depression, and I got a lot of stuff I want to share with y'all. So let's see where we get to and how far we get and how far we go. You're on time. Welcome. So I got boatloads of notes. We're gonna try to let me get my reference material. We're gonna make sure that I'm answering your questions. So if there's anything that comes up, do let me know. But we're gonna go ahead and jump in. It's already 8:35. So let's go ahead and get started. And everybody else who comes in, we'll just let them kind of like stroll in. But I do have a couple of disclaimers. So I'm Dr. Ebony. I am a licensed psychologist. I am certified, all of that great stuff to be able to be bringing y'all what I have to teach y'all. But I do want to kind of give you some information. One, this is not therapy. I have to put that out there. I am not your therapist. I am a therapist bringing you information. I am a psychologist bringing you information. Two, if there's anything that comes up for you that is triggering, because we're going to be talking about trauma, make sure that you are taking care of yourself. If you need to step away, close this out, come back to it, do that. But we are going to be talking about some things that can serve as a trauma trigger or can be triggering for you. We're going to be talking about childhood trauma, relational trauma. So some of this stuff may bring up some stuff in you that you need to go take care of yourself and kind of like step away, get some water, do some breathing. Okay. The other thing is, this is for informational purposes only. This is not something you're going to get certified in. This is going to be for your information, for you to be able to use to help yourself gain an understanding and language so that you can help yourself on your healing journey, but also so that you can help your community as well. When we have language and we understand what's going on for us, we're better able to communicate our needs, our emotions, and better able to help other people cope. A lot of the reasons why many of us aren't coping well now is because we just don't have the language. So we're going to help put some stuff into perspective here as well. Okay. I do want to start this session with just a brief grounding, just to make sure that we are all on the same page and that we are all present, and that you will be aware and mindful of if anything comes up for you, that you have full body and mind to be able to take care of yourself. I live by a fire station, so life is happening outside, so you may hear some sirens, okay? But I like to just put my hand on my chest and my stomach and take a couple deep breaths. This is going to be our grounding exercise, and I invite you to join me. Okay. So I like to just do some breathing to bring myself to center so that we can focus and understand why we're here. Okay. And understand that we're in the present moment. So let's go ahead and jump in. Let's get started. Put in the chat where you're joining me from, your city, all of that great stuff. And we're going to go ahead and jump into it. So welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Ebony again, licensed psychologist and your professor for the next 6 weeks. Tonight, we're going to be talking about intro to trauma and functional depression in your semester course called Trauma, Depression, and Coping Skills. If you have not gotten the syllabus, you can use the link in my bio to grab it. You just have to copy it, put it in a URL, and be able to download the syllabus. There's also a video on my page where I screenshot the syllabus for you, for those people who might not want to go download the syllabus or maybe having a hard time. Okay, so this class meets for the next 6 weeks, February 3rd, 10th, 17th, we have a mid-semester break, and then we meet March 3rd, March 10th, March 17th on Mondays at 7:30 Central Standard Time, 8:30 Eastern. This is a hybrid course where I'm going to try to come live most of the sessions, but really it could be hybrid. It could be some pre-recorded information, but if I'm able, I'm going to try to come live because I just like that interaction. When I made the syllabus, I said, oh, it'll be hybrid, it'll be pre-recorded, but I really like going live and just giving you the information as is. Okay, I like the interaction. So, overview of trauma types is going to be the first thing that we're going to go over. So let's talk about the different types of trauma. But before we get into the different types of trauma, let's talk about what trauma is. In simplistic terms, trauma is something that has happened to you that has shaped the way you think about yourself, the world, and others. It changes your beliefs. It changes the way your brain functions. It changes the way you perceive the world. A lot of times, trauma is misunderstood as something that happens one time, when in actuality, trauma is a spectrum of experiences that continue to kind of like build on each other, and they impact our mind and our body over time. Okay, often these experiences happen before we even got here, y'all. So there's a lot of information. Remember that book that I told y'all to get? I'm gonna go back and get this one. So these are the resources for the class. In the book, It Didn't Start With You, this author talks about epigenetics. Epigenetics is the study of things that are passed down through genetics, such as trauma. And so what this book says, what the author says, is that when your mom was 5 months pregnant with you, the cells that she had in her body were already comprised of everything that you were going to be. So that's her anxiety, that's her depression, that's her trauma. All those things are passed down to you. And whatever she experienced, you were already in her body, because at 5 months pregnant, she has all the cells needed to make you. And so because she's impacted, you are therefore impacted. Okay? And so because of that, a lot of us are carrying things in our bodies that we didn't even know that we had exposure to. A lot of this stuff is generational. So you hear people talk about generational this, generational that. A lot of stuff is in us because of what the people who created us and what they experienced, and then the people who created them, what they experienced, and then the people who created them, what they experienced. Okay, so a lot of us have trauma stored in our bodies that we didn't even ask for. Okay, and trauma changes how we see the world. It shapes. Our brain is shaped around it, especially if it's happening to us at very early ages. And it changes what we think. It changes what we believe. It changes how we experience things. It shapes our perceptions. And I'll give you an example. This example was taught to me in grad school, so I'll give you an example. Say you're walking in the grocery store. It's two people, you and your friend. You see a coworker that you eat lunch with every day. Y'all speak every day. Y'all hang out every day. Y'all stop by each other's offices, cubicles, what have you. Y'all are very cordial. But y'all see each other in the grocery store. You with your homegirl, then you see your coworker. Your coworker walks right past you. And then one of you are going to be like, oh, that was odd. She must be really busy or had somewhere to go. The other one of you are going to be like, oh, I don't know what I did to her. What did I do to her? How did I make her mad? What is she mad at me for? So do you see how two separate people experience the same thing, but based on what your experience is, y'all are going to perceive that situation depending on what you have already been exposed to. So the person who's like, I wonder where she got to go. She's moving really fast. She didn't even see us. That was odd. That's not like her. That person doesn't say they didn't experience trauma, but the way that they see the world is that that's their stuff. Something's going on with her that doesn't have anything to do with me. The other person who may have experienced trauma internalizes the blame and says, oh, it must be me. Something must have happened that I did to her to make her not want to speak to me. She's ignoring me. And then so all day and night, that person's going to ruminate. That means they're going to keep thinking about it all night. What did I do? What did I do? What did I do to them? So that's how trauma shapes our perceptions. It changes how we see things. So sometimes things that we think we see, we're really not seeing. But because of the things that we have experienced in our past, we're seeing it through those lenses. Does that make sense? So when we understand the different types of trauma, it can help us gain the language, the validation, and the tools to navigate our healing journeys. Okay? Great. So the first trauma type that we're going to go over is childhood trauma. This is trauma that happened to you before the age of 18. Okay? These experiences are pivotal. They definitely shape who you are because it happens to you during your formative years. It shapes your emotional experiences. It can either stunt your emotional experiences or exacerbate, meaning make worse or increase a lot of the emotional experiences that you already are wired with or already have. So for instance, if you are a person who's sensitive and that's the way that you're born, that's the way that you're wired, depending on what happens to you or the environment that you're raised in, that can either exacerbate or make bigger, increase, make worse your emotional experiences, or you can cope by shutting down, right? So pivotal, right? Because that's how our brains are developing during this time. You have to remember our brains are not fully developed. And so it shapes and impacts your emotion regulation and your sense of self and your sense of safety. So when something happens to us when we're young, be it a natural disaster, be it violation, be it neglect or abandonment, that can impact your sense of self and your sense of safety. And these experiences, believe it or not, shape how you experience things in the future. So as an adult, many of us are carrying things from when we were a child with us because the things that impacted us as a child are informing how we show up as adults today. Okay? So if we feel unsafe as adults, sometimes that can be traced back to what happened to us when we were children. If we feel insecure as adults, that can be traced back to what happened to us when we were children. So childhood trauma has lasting impacts. Let's talk about the types that people experience. There's physical, emotional, and sexual trauma as a child. And what this does when we experience physical, emotional, and sexual trauma, it teaches us that love is conditional. And it teaches us that we are unsafe. Okay? And so when you experience these things, your whole perception of what it means to be loved, what it means to be kept safe and protected is already kind of impacted by what you have experienced, especially depending on who's the perpetrator of the trauma. Okay, so there's physical, emotional, and sexual trauma. And then there's neglect. So people who have been neglected also experience trauma reactions, and that can impact them later in life. Okay, so neglect is when your basic needs aren't being met. Okay, you may not have clothes, you may not have food, you may not be sure of where things are going to come from, and so you're left feeling unsafe, not really certain around when you're going to experience like the next meal, or you're going to experience safety or love or hugs, or if it's going to be safe for you to kind of like be yourself. So we can also see neglect in terms of, this is going to come up again, if you have parents who are emotionally all over the place, or whose emotions you can't trust due to addiction or due to whatever they have going on, you may try to predict what the environment is going to be like, or you may try to control what the environment is going to be like so that you don't get the brunt of whatever they're dealing with. And so because of whatever they have going on, you may feel neglected. You may not have your basic needs met as a child. And so that can manifest itself in a lot of different ways when you are an adult that we're going to go over. The third type of childhood trauma is exposure to violence. That's police brutality, domestic violence, and other systemic violence, systemic issues, because a lot of this stuff as well is not stuff we are experiencing out of our own households. A lot of the traumas that we experience as a child as well are a result of systemic issues. Okay? Drugs, neighborhoods, proximity to poverty, proximity to violence, policing, things that we just see because of where we are. Okay? Another type of childhood trauma that we don't oftentimes talk about in terms of trauma is parentification. Who knows what parentification is? That's when, I'm going to give y'all a moment. Who knows what parentification is? Who can explain to me? Remember, this is a class, so we're going to engage. I don't know how fast TikTok. So you know what parentification is. Good, Jackie. Jackie knows. And you can just put me, having to take care of your siblings. Absolutely. Having to take care of your siblings, having to take care of when the parents make you a parent. Absolutely, Bridget. when you take on adult roles and responsibilities, right? Taking on nieces and nephews, yes, English tea cake, right? And many times people are pushed into adult roles, parent roles, right? You're your own parent. You are also your parents' parents sometimes, because they often have to take care of money. They have to work. So they may not be able to take care of you. It's often due to hardship. So you're forced to take care of your siblings, your nieces and nephews, because the adults, for whatever reason, can't do it. And they enlist your help involuntarily. You step into this role, right? Involuntarily. And so they may be absent due to hardship. They may be absent due to whatever other issue that they have going on. And you have been pushed into the role of caregiver. And that has been placed upon you by systems and stereotypes. Let's take it a step further. And there's a project called the Adultification of Black Girls. And I think it's by Georgetown. So you can Google Georgetown study, the Adultification of Black Girls. That's when black girls are, the study says black girls are judged more harsh than their white counterparts. They are judged more critically, and for consequences, they receive harsher consequences. So if there's a something that they do, like a conduct issue, they receive harsher suspensions, harsher sentences if there's a law that's broken. And so the adultification also is traumatic, because you're treated as an adult when you're just a child. Okay, and that follows you as well. That impacts how you see the world, yourself, and experience others in your perception, right? So this can either be by the people in your household or by the systems and stereotypes, especially black girls seen as adults. Black girls seen as, oh, you're too big to be doing that, depending on their body size. And so they're ridiculed for things that their other counterparts would be able to do. They're sexualized at very early ages because of the adultification. And sort of placed in the role as an adult when they really are children, never really able to be children. Okay. The fifth type of childhood trauma is microaggressions and racial identity struggles. Okay. Being told that your natural hair is not good enough. Being told that your skin tone is not good enough. Going to school and being told that you need to wear your hair a certain way or cut your hair off to fit standards. Your cultural identity is less than others. That the epitome, the essence of who you are is not good. Also, microaggressions happen by no representation being in the media. So you're growing up not seeing anybody look like you, dress like you, talk like you, come from where you come from. So you start to think that something is wrong with you or that you're less than. Okay? So those are the 5 types of childhood trauma. And the impact that they can have, it's a lot to unpack. It's a lot. That's why I said go take care of yourself. It's a lot to unpack in 6 weeks. It's a lot to unpack in one night, right? So Lydia says, I would put in ESL in kindergarten because my English wasn't good enough. Mind you, I was fluent. Exactly. Microaggressions, right? And that stuff stays with you, right? Right. I just identified these experiences as trauma and I'm in my 30s. A lot of times we don't recognize them as trauma because sometimes they're so second nature. We're all experiencing, they have become the norm when actually they have impacted us. And I'll show you how they've impacted us, Jackie. It can lead to trust issues, self-doubt, difficulty regulating your emotions. It leads you to feeling unworthy of love, success, your worth being connected to you doing things. Anybody in here feel like their worth is connected to what they can do? Your worth is connected to how much success you have. You have constant feelings of unsafety, constant feelings of just feeling like this is not safe for me. I'm never safe. And part of that is true. Now, let's be real. Part of that is true. And it shows. So that's how kids. So if you are a person who deals with children, and one of the things I hate, one of the things I absolutely hate is when adults try to make children hug them or you better speak to them when we don't know that the child is sometimes feeling unsafe. The child is sometimes feeling doubtful. They're not knowing how to regulate their emotions. They don't have language to say, I feel unsafe. So it can manifest that way as a child. It can manifest as attention issues in school. It can manifest as acting out in children. It can manifest in a lot of different ways that people may not understand. And it's like, oh, that girl is just bad, or she got an attitude, all the while she's trying to process with her brain that's not fully developed what is going on and why this stuff is happening around her, right? And as adults, it shows up as anxiety, depression, people pleasing. That's mine. Mine is huge people pleasing, right? I'm a recovering people pleaser. But it shows up that way. Avoidance, hyper independence. Who else is hyper independent? That's me too. Hyper independence, imposter syndrome. Not trusting yourself, feeling like you don't belong, feeling like any minute you're about to be found out. Okay? All of that stuff. I used to get in trouble because I didn't want to hug my family members. And forcing kids to do that impedes on their sense of safety and autonomy. Right? Hey, Shatima, you're right on time. Just come on in. Right? Just blessed. And so a lot of us are experiencing things as adults that are rooted in our childhood. Okay? So that's childhood trauma. That's like your crash course in childhood trauma and what that looks like. Okay? So everybody take a breather. Before we move on to relational trauma. Get you a sip of water, because there's more. There's more. We were forced to hug all the adults. Yeah. That kind of gives you a sense of, I can't really say what I want to do with my body. And so you grow up to be adults who really kind of feel like you don't have ownership over your body, or you got to do something, or you feel this obligation that as children you weren't really given the space to really own. Like, I don't want to hug them. And so there was a parent on Instagram, I think, that was like, I don't make my children hug people. I don't force them to do that. Yeah, I'm feeling a lot better, Cynthia. I was about to cough up my lungs last week. I am feeling so much better. So yes, thank you so much. I'm feeling better. You know, the congestion just kind of stays around, but I'm feeling so much better. Yeah. You go soothe yourself, whatever means you feel like you have. You're late, but you're here. So the next one that we're going to go into is relational trauma. And I got my fan because last time I was sweating. Relational trauma is the second type of trauma we're going to review tonight. Okay? Thank you for asking. Relational trauma. Now, relational trauma happens when trust, safety, and your emotional needs are violated within the context of relationships. Relational trauma and childhood trauma can overlap, but relational trauma is when trust, safety, and emotional needs are violated within the context of relationships. We have 4 ways or 4 types of relational trauma. The first type that we're going to go over is unhealthy family dynamics. This is where you're in a home where love and validation are inconsistent, is missing, or is contingent upon what you can do, what kind of success you have, what you can achieve. You know what, Shatima? If somebody can tell me how to record this, excuse me, it'll be recorded. But this is only my second time going live on TikTok. I don't know how to record this, but if somebody can help me, I would love that, because I want y'all to have this too. But unhealthy family dynamics, the home where love is and validation are inconsistent. Love is kind of used as a means of transactions. If you do this for me, mama's going to love you very much. If you do this for me, mama's going to not love you anymore. Or is missing and is contingent upon success. Or this is not something I had in my notes, but it just came to me. Parents who make children responsible for their happiness. Parents who make children responsible for their social interactions, or make children everything that they need. So you're my best friend. You're my only friend. I'm not saying that that's on the surface unhealthy, but that dynamic can get into some territory where that child feels responsible for the adult and feels responsible for even having their own life separate from the adult. So you start to feel guilt. You start to feel responsible for making sure they're okay rather than them making sure you're okay. There have been moments where I've heard parents pretending to be dead or be lost or things like that, or unalive themselves. I know I can't say certain words, but unalive themselves. So to get a reaction out of children, that kind of thing. So that can create issues for a child. That can be traumatic. My mom's only identity was being a mom, and so you feel responsible. There are also parents who tell children, and I've heard this in therapy. You how they say it? You changed my life, and though that can be good for some people that's a heavy burden to carry, because now that person feels responsible for the trajectory of that parent's life, and so it can be heavy. Okay. Toxic romantic relationships that include manipulation, betrayal, and emotional abandonment. So if you're in a relationship where you're constantly being manipulated, constantly being cheated on, gaslit, betrayed, talked about, put down, emotional abandonment, kind of like you're giving, or they get you to like them and then they leave. They get you to fall in love with them and then they leave. Or how they love you or how they show up with you is contingent on what you can do for them. Those things can be traumatic as well. My mom constantly talked about struggling, having a rough child. Always feeling like you had to step up. Even if they don't say anything directly to you, you have this immense amount of responsibility to that parent. Friendship betrayal is one that we don't talk enough about, right? So you can feel traumatized or experience trauma reactions from a friendship that is filled with feeling like you're being used, feeling like you're being manipulated, disregarded, and dismissed, feeling like people are your friend for what you can do for them again, or they're your friend for what benefit they get from you. The relationship is not reciprocal, right? So friendship trauma, friendship betrayal is something that I'm starting to see people talk about, but we need to spend a lot more time talking about. So in your TikTok studio, you can tap live recording, locate the live replay you like to download. Got it, Bridget, I'm going to try. You're going to get it back, Shatima. You're going to get it back. You got to get it back. Thank you for sharing that. And then, so you got unhealthy family dynamics, toxic romantic relationship, friendship betrayal. Then the last one of the type of relational trauma is workplace or community invalidation. This is when you feel unseen, undervalued, and disregarded in spaces that are supposed to be supportive. And this can also feel like betrayal. So being at work and feeling like, because you hear it all the time at work. This is a family. We treat you as a family. Everybody's family. But then when times come for you to kind of like experience a promotion or get rewarded for your performance, you're disregarded, you're dismissed, you're looked over. That can be traumatic for some folks. Feeling like you're supposed to be supported in your community. Okay. Community invalidation. We hear this with saying you're not this enough. You're not black enough. You're not feminine enough. You're not blank, blank, blank enough. You're not, you talk like this. And so just feeling invalidated by the spaces that's supposed to feel safe. The spaces that are supposed to feel supportive. And then, so y'all ever heard the saying, all skin folk ain't kinfolk? So that's what that is, like feeling like, I feel betrayed by the very people that I thought was supposed to support and uplift me. So I feel betrayed. We got a lot of that around the election, but we'll just kind of leave that where that's a topic for another day. So those are the 4 types of trauma, okay? And then the impact of experiencing racial trauma can be you're fearful of intimacy now. You won't get close with folks. You won't let folks get close with you. You won't expand your circle. You won't kind of put yourself out there to be vulnerable. You end up over accommodating, being overly giving, overly kind of pleasing to other folks. You avoid conflict. You don't say anything. If things ruffle your feathers, you don't speak up. You don't set boundaries. You emotionally shut down. So you kind of if something makes you mad, you don't voice it. You kind of just go to your own little corner. You isolate. Also, this can show up in attachment wounds as well. So feeling like you can't really get close to folks, or you're anxiously attached, or you're preoccupied in that, are they going to leave? Are they going to stay? Always overthinking the situation. This can also be due to some historical issues and systemic breakdowns in Black families and communities, having families torn apart either by drugs or by other systemic issues. I mean, this dates way back to slavery, having families ripped apart, no roots, no connections, right? So a lot of that stuff continues to impact us with how we feel attached, who we feel attached to, who we gravitate towards, and the level of intimacy and vulnerability that exists inside of those relationships, okay? So that's relational trauma. The third type of trauma that we're going to cover is race-based trauma. This is emotional. So let's take a breather before we go into race-based trauma. Just kind of ground ourselves. Come back. We've already gone over 2. Come back. Race-based trauma is going to be the third. Okay? She's like, the person said, I'm literally there right now, right? So race-based trauma is emotional and it's an emotional and psychological impact of racism, discrimination, and systemic oppression. And there's 3 types of race-based trauma. Okay? And I always say, I don't know how you can't live in this country, in this world, and very few of us can say that we haven't experienced at least race-based trauma. Okay? So direct trauma is the first type. Direct trauma is the first type. Experiencing racism firsthand. This can be at work, being called out your name, being told, we're experiencing it right now. Hello? We're experiencing it right now. Being told that something is going to be wiped away from you just because of who you are and the race that you are. Being told that you are not going to get an advancement or a promotion just because of who you are and how you look. Being profiled, police brutality, police violence. That's direct trauma, direct race-based trauma. You're targeted because of who you are and how you look. People create policies that continue to jeopardize your safety, jeopardize your quality of life, right? That's direct. Then there's indirect trauma, where you witness racism via social media, TV, news, or you heard about it and continue to hear about it. So we kind of are getting double whammies all the time. We're experiencing it directly happening to us, and then we're hearing about it and seeing it happening on a large scale to people who look like us, including us, right? And so then there's generational trauma, what we started the class talking about. This is when you carry the stress and survival patterns. That's important. We not only carry the stress of people who came before us, we carry the survival patterns of people who came before us. Like the safety that they felt. Y'all, so one, I don't think this could be one, but this is just used to illustrate a pattern, a survival pattern. So when one of us takes off running, everybody takes off running. Survival patterns. We'll ask questions later. Because we've learned over time how to get ourselves out of danger, how to kind of like protect ourselves. So that's a survival pattern. It's like an unspoken rule. We already know. Okay? Get out. So generational trauma is when you carry the stress and survival patterns of ancestors who endured slavery, segregation, violence, and other systemic injustices. It's in you. Okay? It's in you, and it shapes and informs how you show up with the world. Okay? And this can lead to, somebody just said it. I think I have PTSD from work, but it's all minorities, even the boss. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You can still feel, people carry internalized stuff all the time. People can be very hateful towards you who look like you. And everybody can be of a marginalized group and still inflict harm of the oppressor because they're carrying that in their bodies as well. And so they will oppress you in ways that they have been oppressed in order to feel elevated, even in your presence. So that's why you hear people say crabs in a bucket mentality, because people are always trying to get ahead and they will step on whomever they can to get ahead, right? So that stuff can still impact you, whether it was people who look like you or not. It can still happen, right? Now, the way race-based trauma shows up, and I 1000% believe this with my entire being, chronic stress and the issues that Black and brown women experience in our bodies as it relates to our hormones, inflammation, fibroids, PCOS, endometriosis. All these issues that we carry, we know stress disrupts our hormonal balance. And fibroids are a direct result of hormonal imbalance, high cortisol, right? So stuff that we're experiencing day to day, but also stuff that's been passed down in our bodies. Remember, epigenetics. Your mom, when she was 5 months pregnant with you, already had the cells to make you. So whatever she experienced also gets passed down to you, and whatever her people experience gets passed down to you. So there's a lot that we're carrying. So chronic stress, chronic fatigue, hypervigilance, a lot of health issues, right? A lot of health issues. This persistent feeling of feeling unsafe. This chronic feeling of feeling unsafe, especially in white spaces or just in general. This can also contribute to imposter syndrome or internalized racism. So remember, I can't remember who said it now, but internalized racism is also an impact of what you experienced. In the book, The Body Keeps the Score. Remember, these are your reading materials, okay? In the book, The Body Keeps the Score, the author talks about dogs who have been left in kennels. At first, they were shocked. If they left the kennel, they were shocked. They took the shocker away. The dog still remained and acted in the kennel as if the shocker was there. They no longer needed the shocker. They were governed by the memory of being shocked. So people who have internalized racism are a lot of times governed. You don't even need the oppressor anymore. You carry that in you. You don't even need them to be present. You carry it with you. You can oppress yourself. And a lot of this happens as well from childhood trauma, relational trauma as well. A lot of us will beat ourselves up. And we don't even need nobody to do it. Our own words beat us up. I feel guilty. I feel ashamed. I'm not good enough. I should have known better. Look at me. I'm so stupid. Look at me. I'm so fat. Look at me. Nobody wants me. Right? We don't even need the perpetrator to be present anymore. We've internalized the language of the people who harmed us. And so this happens on all levels. We do this in relationships, sabotage. We don't even need anybody to be there. We'll sabotage it ourselves. We'll burn the whole thing down ourselves. We don't need any help. It starts to feel too comfortable, aka peaceful. We'll burn it down. We'll create some chaos up in here. Sometimes that's how it manifests. It manifests by needing to create something that feels familiar so you know how to navigate it. We like the familiar. We like what we can predict. We don't like, as humans, the unknown. The unknown feels safe. We would rather be able to predict where we're going to go. That's just evolution. That's just how we are, right? We want to be able to predict. And so without us knowing, we will sabotage things, or we will try to hurt other people in the same ways that we've been hurt. Now, is that going to happen for every single person who's experienced trauma? No. But those are some ways that it can impact. And those are some ways that it can show up. Paralyzed by fear. Being very afraid, very anxious, very, very scared to step out and do things. Okay? Very afraid. So I'm seeing some people say, yep. That's a lot of baggage, but we got it. That's a lot of baggage, but we got it, which is why it's so important for us to be clearing out stuff. Clearing out stuff, letting stuff go, learning the art of letting go, the art of detaching, so that we can release a lot of stuff that we're holding in our bodies that lead to chronic health issues, cardiovascular issues, especially for Black women, heart disease and all of that, right? High blood pressure, all of that. So that's your chapter on relational that's your chapter on trauma. Now we're going to go into functional depression and talk about how this looks. Okay? Because this is what many of us are also dealing with. Okay? Now, when I was putting this together and I was putting my little notes together and taking up stuff, I said, ooh, not me. Not me, a high functioning depressed person. Not me. All these things fit me, right? Because a lot of times you don't recognize that these things fit you until you kind of like sit down and you're like, whoa, that's what's been happening to me. Now I got language. Okay, so let's talk about functional depression and how it shows up. It's often called high functioning depression or persistent depression that just kind of like stays around. It's a form of depression where people appear to function well in daily life. They're like, oh, she got it together. She doing well. She's smiling. She dancing on TikTok. She happy. But all the while, there's feelings of sadness, emptiness, exhaustion, fatigue, right, Cynthia? It's just like you look happy on the surface, but you're high functioning. You're achieving, you're getting this award and that award, but all the while there's chronic feelings on the inside of sadness, emptiness, exhaustion, and just feeling like something's missing. I mean, you're just invalidated. Yeah, right? So, and many high achievers are high functioning depressed folks, but it doesn't mean everybody is. But it often goes unnoticed. A lot of times the depression, a heavy heart, just feeling like, yes, something feels heavy. It reminds me when you say that of Solange's Cranes in the Sky. So Solange's song, like, I tried to drink it away, tried to smoke it away, tried to sex it away. Nothing worked. It's just like this heaviness, right? Because a lot of us are experiencing like the weight of the world, right? That's exactly right. Can't function at home, but can show up and get things done in the world, right? Yes. But it goes unnoticed because we've been socialized to meet responsibilities. We've been socialized to work, keep going, succeed, survival patterns. Remember, we just talked about survival patterns over there with race-based trauma, right? So many of us have the survival pattern of going, no matter if we're feeling down, no matter if we're feeling sad or anything, right? While silently struggling, okay? Crying and you don't know why you're crying. Tears just flowing. Sad and you don't know why you're sad, right? You have all the things, but don't know why you're sad, right? Because all the things is not what's going to remedy the chronic emptiness that you feel or the sadness that you feel. Surviving, not thriving, right, Raquel? Often so this is something I want us to understand. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, but this is something I want us to understand and disperse to our communities. Remember, language helps us heal. Language helps us kind of feel validated and gain some understanding. A lot of times when people unalive themselves, let's take, why did the name just escape me? Ugh. I hate when I do this. Ugh. On Ellen, when people unalive themselves, it looks like disbelief. We can't believe it. And we will say things like, no, they would never do that. They would never do that because they were happy. They were dancing. They were Twitch. Thank you. Thank you, Keisha. Look at my sister. Thank you. And I don't know why that escaped me. But when people are functionally, high-functioning depressed people, they're struggling in silence. Cynthia just said it. I can show up. I'm on 100. Thank you, Pooh. I'm on 100 in public, but I get home and I can't function. It's a silent struggle. So a lot of times when we see people do that, it's not that they wouldn't. It's that we've come to believe that happiness means, or a face of happiness means you're okay. We don't really understand high functioning depression. We don't really understand that two things can be happening at the same time. As a community, we don't understand that somebody can be smiling on the outside and breaking apart on the inside. And so when that happens to somebody, we're like, no, they would not have ever done that. That's high functioning depression. That's somebody that is silently struggling. So when people do that, loved ones in the community fail to believe it and say it doesn't look like, they fail to believe it because also it doesn't look like traditional depression. The person's taking a shower. The person is going to work. The person is going to dinner. They're putting on makeup. They're participating in activities, but they don't know that they're struggling on the inside. So it's hard to wrap our brains around. But now, since we have this information that, yes, people can look happy and not be happy, y'all. The affect does not match their mood. But the thing about a mood, you may never know what somebody's mood is. You may never know what somebody's mood is. Some people are empaths, so you can feel people's energy, right? Yes, they may dissociate. Some people can feel people's energy. It's like, ooh, something feels off about them, right? But you may never know somebody's mood if all they're doing is showing up and just happy all the time. Excited like that. Yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do that. We got this going on. They're going from this project to that project. They're making money. They're making moves. They're movers and shakers. They're doing this. They're going there. They're traveling here, traveling there. But all the while, they feel completely empty, right? But you get around them and you're like, something's off. Something's not right about them, right? Let me check in on them. And that's why we always say check in on your strong friends, right? Because if it doesn't look like traditional depression where they are not taking showers, they may not be eating, they're losing weight or gaining weight, we may never know. But we need to understand from this day forward, people can be doing all of those things and still be struggling. It could be related to something they're experiencing now, or it could be related to a lot of that stuff that we just talked about, right? Thank you, Tiffany. Yep. It's prevalent because high functioning depression is especially prevalent in our communities because we're just expected to push through, get through it, survival patterns. And for a long time, we've had to do that. We've had to just survive, push through and avoid vulnerability. Or don't talk about it for the fear of looking weak, for the fear of being told that, oh, you're a man, you're supposed to be fine. Or I heard this before. I actually heard that today. Let me tell y'all, somebody said that to me today. Why is that man depressed? He got all that money. And I'm like, money doesn't make people not depressed. In fact, the more money some people make, the more depressed they become. But that literally was said to me today. I don't know why they're depressed. They got so much money. But what we tend to do is we tend to think that the thing that would make us feel better is the thing that should make them feel better. So we want more money. So we like, shoot, if I had more money, all my problems would be solved. And while that's true for a lot of us, for some people who have it, that's not the thing that they need. They may need the emotional stuff that you have that they are lacking. They may need the friends. They may need genuine friends around them that they don't have. Okay? Yeah, I hate when people say just push through or just push through or just push through it, right? Sometimes Black people, brown communities, marginalized folks with functional depression, they're seen as the strong friend, the overachiever, the dependable caregiver. So it makes it hard for other people to recognize that they are suffering and struggling. They're the people who always say yes to things. I got it. I'll do it, right? So you want to check on those folks who are always jumping at the opportunity to say yes to something. Those people who can't quite slow down. Those people who are like, okay, I just got this award, but what's next? Those people who are like, okay, I just got this, but what's next? I'm typically that person for seriously, like to completely honest. To the point where my sister last year, semester since we in school, had to send me an article about a Black woman who had a stroke, and she said, you need to slow down. Hey, Carlene, you need to slow down, okay? Because it's real. We end up holding so much on the inside that if it's not for somebody checking on us or saying, hey, I'm noticing that you're bouncing from one thing to the next. How are you doing? Are you sitting down? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you resting? Are you eating? Are you drinking your water? Are you going to bed on time? Okay? Carrying other people's burdens. Okay? So let's talk about how high functioning depression shows up. It can show up as chronic fatigue, disguised in hustle culture. I mean, hustle culture is going to take us out of here. I'm so glad that I'll sleep when I'm not here stuff is gone for the most part. But it's chronic fatigue and feeling like you need to be present. I see this all the time with people on social media. I'm guilty of it sometimes as well. Oh, I got to post. Oh, I got to be present. Oh, I got to jump on this. Or, oh, I got to do that. Right? Before I even said yes to this, I actually had to sit down and look at my schedule and say, you know what? Can I do it? I actually said no. Excuse me. I tell people, I tried to run away from this for real. And so it kept coming back to me and I was like, well, okay, I'm going to do it, but do I have the time? So I ran it across my friends in the group chat and I was like, I think this is going to be my syllabus. I think I'm going to do it from February to May. And it took my friends saying, that sounds like a lot. You sure you don't want to just do 4 weeks? I'm seeing people do 4 weeks, 6 weeks. I don't think you have to do a whole semester for real, Ebony. I think you could just do 6 weeks. So it's like that chronic fatigue. So for me, it's almost a visceral reaction for me to be like, yes, I'm going to do it. But this time I was like, no, I'm not doing that. That sounds like a lot. I don't have the energy. But then when I decided I was going to do it because it's me, I was like, I'm going to go all in. So then even when I said yes to it, I had to be pulled back. Because of a function of mine, a pattern of mine is to do and overgive and overextend myself. So having people around you who can pull you back and understand who you are is going to be helpful. But we can't get there if we're not vulnerable with the people around us and they know our struggles. So the people around me know that I struggle with saying no. The people around me know that I struggle with overcommitting myself. So they're able to say, you need to pull that back. Okay, but so this is how we cope with functioning depression, as well as tell people around you what you're used to doing, so they can be like, you know what, let's walk this back. Let's walk this back. Okay, and if I'm not catching your comments, it's not because I don't see them. I'm just kind of missing them. Nia said, I remember being in seminary. One of the professors said, I see, no ma'am, we're not doing that. No ma'am. Okay, it looks like believing rest is for the weak. You feel guilty for slowing down. You feel guilty for saying, this is my slow season. I'm going to rest this season. And here's the thing I need us to understand about guilt. Just because you feel guilty does not mean the guilt is real. A lot of us are conditioned to feel guilty when guilt doesn't even fit the circumstance or the situation that we are responding to. Guilt is only justified and valid when you have done something wrong against your own morals, values, and judgment. You're not guilty for taking a break. You haven't done anything wrong for taking a break. So a lot of times, a lot of us are so conditioned to feel guilty that we just feel guilty in response to something. I feel guilty when I had to say no. That's usually a conditioned response. Because saying no is not wrong. But somewhere, if we flip back to our childhood trauma stuff, somewhere we've been made to feel guilty for saying no. We've been made to feel like we have to be responsible for folks. So if you ever get this sense of feeling guilty and it doesn't fit the situation, you want to check in with yourself and say, wait a second, have I done anything wrong? Did I violate one of my morals or ethics? If the answer is no, that guilt is usually conditioned. And so you want to ask yourself, what does this remind me of? What is this an earlier memory of? Why do I feel guilty for saying no for something that protects me? Maybe that's because you never learned how to protect yourself and you learn how to protect everybody else. Maybe that's because you learn to be responsible for everybody else. But if we slow down and take a minute, we'll see that a lot of the guilt that we experience is actually conditioned. And it's just stuff that we're used to feeling that has no basis in fact or reality. Okay? So Bridget, we got to learn boundaries. Because where in you did you learn that boundaries weren't okay? Where in you did you learn that you couldn't have boundaries? So we got to float this stuff back, right? Need to learn to advocate for myself. Need to learn to stand up for myself. Need to learn to say no to some things and yes to some other things, believe it or not. Yes to a good time. Yes to rest. Yes to time with friends. Yes to vulnerability, okay? So a lot of this stuff can flow back to our family, okay? It can also show up as being busy or constantly working. Not want to sit down. That's me. I don't want to sit down. My family say I don't know how to sit down. Overworking to the point where you got to make yourself stop. Like the fall, I was like, I'm just going to work and I'm just going to do therapy. I'm not going to push my therapy card as hard. I'm not going to go as hard trying to create this program and this offer and that service. I'm going to show up and do my 9 to 5. Sometimes that's what rest look like, okay? It can also show up as emotional numbness, masked as strength. I don't know if my auntie is watching, but if she is, I love you anyway, but I'm going to say it anyway. I have an auntie, excuse me, y'all. I have seen my aunt cry at the funerals that we've had in our families. None. Her sisters, her brothers. I have not seen her cry. So a lot of us are so strong so we're emotionally numb. Or a lot of that emotional stuff is masked. I see this in a lot of men not crying, a lot of parents not crying, because a lot of that stuff is so bottled up that they just feel like I just got to be strong. But not crying, not allowing yourself just to fall apart, right? Feeling blah, disconnected from joy, even in moments where you're supposed to feel good. You ever been somewhere? Oh, it's going to cut me off, y'all. I'm going to come back. Uh-oh. It's going to cut me off in 5 minutes, but I promise y'all I'm going to come back. I didn't know that you had a time limit on TikTok. I guess I haven't reached that point yet. But if it cuts me off, we just coming back, okay? But emotional numbness masked as strength. You feel blah or disconnected. You ever been somewhere where you were feeling like, I'm supposed to be having a good time, but I'm just not having a good time? You feel disconnected, or somebody said earlier, you're disassociated. Difficulty being present. You feel empty inside even when you're smiling and laughing, right? It shows up as irritability as your baseline, right, Green Lady? Yeah, and that's true. So a lot of times we become numb too as a way to protect ourselves. So you experience so much loss, so much death, so much grief. You use emotional numbness as a coping skill. You become desensitized, right? So a lot of times high functioning depression shows up as irritability as our baseline. You ever met somebody who was just always just irritable? Like, you just irritable. Every little thing you just irritable. Everything just makes you irritable. That's your baseline. Mood swings, snapping out on folks, right? Right? Shatima, if you need some resources, I'm happy to provide those to you, my love, okay? Struggling to keep up with even the smallest of tasks, feeling easily overwhelmed. Some people now are saying that they experience ADHD, and that very well may be it. Crashing out, Jackie, crashing out for no reason, just like losing it, right? You're welcome. Some people can say that they're overwhelmed, forgetting small tasks. Sometimes that does manifest as ADHD. But y'all, a lot of times the attention issues that we are experiencing also are a result of anxiety and depression. Some of us really do have undiagnosed ADHD, and some of us have also, or anxiety and depression that also impact our cognitive issues, or our cognitive functioning, our executive functioning. So feeling overwhelmed, not being able to attend, feeling paralyzed, all of that, right? Abusing substances, overusing substances, right? Menopause, anxiety and depression has given me attention issues. Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of these things impact the same parts of the brain that are responsible for attention and focus and concentration. So it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Sometimes we don't even know, right? A lot of us get late diagnosis, from trauma. Exactly. A lot of us are neurodivergent from trauma. 1000%, right? Self-isolation in plain sight is also another way. A lot of us self-isolate. So this can look like you are canceling plans, saying no to things, not showing up. So you're isolated and you're in plain sight. It's like, oh, Ebony is there, but she's not coming to anything anymore. She's emotionally withdrawn. She's physically present, but she's checked out. We see this in relationships a lot. People are just checked out, right? They're there, but they're not engaging with the children anymore. They're not engaging with their friends anymore. Well, remember, so let's break this down. Neurodivergent just says that your brain does not function in typical ways. That's what neurodivergency is in a simple way. Your brain is just not functioning in the way that the world is set up. It's not typical. It used to be called neurotypical, now neurodivergent, right? So if you go back and look at, I don't know if y'all gonna be able to, I'm gonna try to get this replay up for you. But trauma impacts the brain in a lot of different ways. So if you are experiencing trauma at very early ages, then your brain is forming and shaping around the experiences that you have. So yes, if your brain is functioning around trauma and shaping around trauma, then yes, you will have some attention issues, some focus issues, some concentration issues, the ways that you experience, see, and perceive the world that are not typical of the way other people perceive it or see it or experience it who have not had that experience. So there may be some things that you don't quite recognize, some things that you don't quite comprehend because of what happened to you earlier. Remember, when you're experiencing trauma, a lot of the stuff that we're experiencing puts us into survival mode. So we're like in life or death mode. We're responding. So if your brain is constantly on the lookout for survival, your brain is not functioning in the ways that it could if it had not experienced that thing, on top of any depression, anxiety, or family history of any issue that you have. So absolutely. Absolutely. They ain't gonna tell you that though, because a lot of us are walking around neurodivergent as hell, right? And we're not experiencing things in the way that other people do. And we're like, oh my God, why am I not experiencing that? I can't keep up with anything. And so and a lot of it is the result of trauma. A lot of it is the result of trauma. But it's like what we talked about, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Because a lot of us have inherited trauma, passed down trauma, then experienced trauma that is now complex, compounded, right? So you just got all kinds of stuff happening, right? Okay. So it can look like that. It can also look like success as a coping mechanism. Overachieving, seeking validation through achievement and degrees. You can't get enough degrees. You can't get enough certifications, right? So people who are high functioning depressed people may continue to go and cope by achieving project to project, new job promotion after new job promotion, validation, seeking validation all the time, feeling on top of the world when they get praises and awards, but feeling very low and down when they don't, right? Good. So this is what all of this was for, is to give us language, to give us understanding of what it is. Now, I have to say, I'm a psychologist, but I'm not diagnosing you personally. I'm giving you information. This is information for you to use to be informed, okay? So I got to tell you that, okay? Also, high-functioning depression can manifest itself as somatic symptoms, headaches, stomach issues, muscle tension, high blood pressure, cardiovascular issues, feeling tired, all of the above. Okay? So if that's something you got going on, you may have to look at yourself and be like, well, if I'm my high blood pressure, I'm eating well, I'm working out, it could be hereditary, genetic, but also what other stuff do I have going on? And that's when it's time to check in with your emotions, check in with what's impacting me, what's going on with me, right? Good, Nia. Awesome. Hypertension, thyroid issues, hormones being out of whack. Okay? Me, as I sit here right now with a fan. Okay? So that's functioning depression, but we struggle to name functional depression because we have a very hard time. Fibroids, absolutely. Let me back up before I go to functional depression. So what they don't tell us a lot of times in the medical field is that fibroids are a direct result of imbalanced hormones. So a lot of the things that we are experiencing as it relates to stress, depression, and anxiety, when your body goes into fight, flight, or freeze mode, or fawn, you're constantly releasing all of these hormones, all of these things that are throwing your hormones out of whack. But if we're in a chronic state of stress, chronic state of survival, think about what that's doing to your brain on a biological level. Overproduction of estrogen, overproduction of cortisol, overproduction of progesterone, overproduction of all these things. And then when so the way that I understand it is that it begins to gather and metastasize, right, in your reproductive organs, right? So it's not studied enough for them to say, oh yeah, there's a direct correlation. But an excess of estrogen, progesterone, androgens, all that stuff in your blood leads to the growth of fibroids. So if our emotions like stress impact our hormones, there has to be at least a correlation there. So when I went to a functional medicine doctor, one of the things that she put me on was an adaptogen for stress. And that balanced out my hormones, which then stops the growth, the cramps that come along with fibroids. Because all of this stuff is interconnected. What trauma does for so many of us is it cuts us off from our head, it cuts our head off from our bodies. We no longer realize that there's a connection here. There are pathways all up and down our bodies, from our brain to our gut, from our gut back up to our brain to our liver. A lot of hormones are filtered out, processed, metabolized through the liver, right? So a lot of us don't recognize that a lot of stuff that we're experiencing is impacting all of these organs on deeper levels, because trauma cuts us off at the neck. So we carry everything in our head and forget what's happening in our bodies. Or we carry everything in our bodies and forget that it's connected to our head. So part of grounding is us bringing ourselves back to our bodies and reestablishing that connection. Okay? And that's why you hear so many people talk about grounding, bringing yourself back to center, bringing yourself back to center. That's connecting, so we understand that all of this works together. None of this works separate. So any emotions that you are experiencing is impacting something on a physical level. Okay? So that is something that we can use, because then we are more informed to go on our doctor and say, hey, explain this to me. Tell me about this, right? Yeah, Cynthia. Love functional medicine doctor was the best thing I probably could have done to balance out my hormones, and I can't wait to go back. Okay, so when we talk about functional depression, it's hard to recognize in our societies because we struggle to name it. Because people will say, you're not depressed, you're just tired. Right? You missed a lot, Tiffany. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You're not depressed, you're just tired. We don't have time to be depressed. You ever heard that? But I'm gonna try to get the replay for you, Tiffany. I'm gonna try to put it up. You don't have time to be depressed. Go depress them dishes is what we used to hear when we were growing up, right? Go depress them dishes, right? We can be depressed, right? We can be depressed. We can be tired and depressed. We can be all the things, but we struggle to see people as depressed because honestly, to recognize that somebody is depressed means that we have to find a way to get them well. And a lot of times we just don't have the solutions, the coping skills, the means to do that. So we may want to wish it away, dismiss it away for folks, or we say things like, that's not something that we experience. That belongs to other people. That belongs to other people. That's not something we experience, okay? Because there's a fear of stigma. Then there's religious and cultural expectations around like pray it away. You got to have enough faith. And so you start to feel like, well, if you're depressed, you're not faithful enough. And so now there's shame, right? Now there's like, oh, I just need to up my faith. Honestly, you can do that and still be depressed. It just is what it is. One does not negate the other, okay? How can you not be in a world where so much is happening? How can you not be when the very people who were supposed to take care of you violated you, right? You wasn't allowed to be depressed, right? Right? Okay? She said, I'm depressed myself. I hope I'll give us a little recap when we're done. But we're afraid to name it, okay? So actually, the way that we move towards healing, and this is the last part and then we'll do a recap. The way that we move towards healing is we reclaim mental wellness as a birthright. It is our birthright to be well. And that may be a mantra that somebody wants to adapt or adopt this year. It is my birthright to be well. It is my birthright to be well. Yeah. Right, Nia? No, we won't talk about that. It is my birthright to be well. We need to challenge the harmful cultural narratives that exist in our community around trauma and depression. Harmful narratives are, if you just prayed enough, you wouldn't be depressed. Yes, you can still be depressed. If you were just more faithful, you wouldn't be depressed. Yes, you can be super faithful and super depressed. Super faithful and super anxious. So we need to challenge those every time they come up. We need to, every time we hear somebody say, oh, they wouldn't have done that to themselves because they were so happy. We need to challenge that. They would not have unalived themselves because they're so happy. We need to challenge that. We need to challenge that. That's how we begin to push more towards wellness, right? We need to address medical mistrust, right? We need to find people who are not culturally competent, but culturally responsive. We need to find people who are steeped in doing the cultural work and understanding the differences that come from our unique experiences. We need to work with people who understand the uniqueness of the trauma that we experience on both an individual level, a societal level, and a systemic level, okay? We need to continue to advocate for mental health accessibility. Voting with our dollars, or advocating with our dollars, advocating for affordable community-based mental health, advocating for therapists to get paid what they are worth. This is how we move towards wellness, right? Advocating that we do something about the tests that gatekeep and keep so many of us out once we get to the phase of testing. The monetary barriers. They keep so many of us who look like us outside of teaching and providing therapy to folks. What? Pay me my money. And this is to the insurance companies as well. Educating future generations that it's okay to have feelings and it's okay to ask for help. Modeling that to future generations that I'm going to ask for help It's okay to ask for help. Modeling vulnerability. Modeling not knowing that you, or not having it all together. Modeling saying, you know what, I'm working on that. Modeling rest. Modeling slowing down. Okay? Modeling care for yourself as resistance. Modeling care for your community as liberation. And that's care for everybody. That's care for every single person, regardless of your political and religious beliefs. That's how we move towards wellness. Now we got questions. Who got questions? While I do a recap. Put your questions up, and I'm going to do a recap for our folks who did come. So I'm Dr. Ebony, y'all. I'm a psychologist, and this is your spring semester, 6 weeks of us learning about trauma, functional depression, and coping skills. This is your intro to trauma, intro to functional depression, intro to coping skills, and each week we're going to build on this, okay? Go back and check the other videos that are on my page. I give you your resources for the class. I give you your syllabus that is there, okay? Give you some things to read. All of these resources are listed in a post on my feed. But we talked about trauma, what it is. It's not a single event only. It's a spectrum of things that impact how you see the world, yourself, others, and how you perceive the world around you. We talked about the 3 types of trauma. Childhood trauma, which happens to you before the age of 18. They shape how you experience the world, shapes your brain. We talked about the 5 types of trauma: physical, emotional, sexual. You got neglect, exposure to violence, parentification and adultification, microaggressions, and racial identity struggles. Then you got relational trauma, unhealthy family dynamics, toxic romantic relationships, friendship betrayal, workplace betrayal, or community betrayal and invalidation. And then you got race-based trauma. It could be directly happening to you, or it could be indirect, witnessing it happening to somebody else. Or it can be generational trauma, stuff that was passed down that you carry, stuff that you may not even been here to experience, but was passed down to you through genetics, epigenetics, generational things, cultural things, okay? And we talked about the ways that this can show up for you as an adult. It can show up as imposter syndrome. A lot of this childhood trauma, relational trauma, race-based trauma can show up as imposter syndrome, trust issues, anxiety, depression, avoidance, hyper-independence, people-pleasing. Okay? It can show up as chronic stress, hypervigilance, feeling unsafe, chronic feelings of feeling unsafe. It can show up as burnout. Burnout, I didn't even say burnout earlier. I missed that. But it can manifest itself as burnout. It can manifest itself as internalized racism, all of that. Okay? So that's the overview of the trauma part. You're so welcome. Thank y'all for being here and joining me. Yep, that's cloudiness, fogginess, just feeling like you're constantly like in a fog. How can we reverse the traumas we may have passed on to our children? Could saying I was wrong help? Absolutely. You want to know how much it would have helped me to hear some people apologize when I was young? Think about how apologies help us now. When somebody says, you know what, I'm sorry. Think about what that does to your what's the word I'm looking for? Your morale. Think about what that does for the relationship. Telling your children I'm sorry is a huge act of vulnerability. Saying I'm wrong is a huge act of vulnerability. It models to them that I don't always have it together. And yes, sometimes you are right. Sometimes I am wrong. Sometimes you are right. And you are able to tell me. It gives them agency, right? It gives them words and language. So when they become an adult, they can tell somebody, you're not going to treat me like that. That's wrong. You give them agency, permission to govern themselves, to say, I don't like that. My feelings are valid about that. I don't have to like something, and I'm not going to force myself to like it. Because believe it or not, forcing kids to do stuff goes a long way, right? Now, sometimes you do need to force them to do things because they need to learn, like, to try different things and stuff like that, like eating their veggies and stuff like that. But imagine you trying to force a child to do something that they're telling you absolutely they don't like, and you're like, but I said do it anyway. When we get older, not saying this happens for everybody, but we're like, well, let me just try it. You learn to doubt yourself. Now you don't even trust what you like. You don't even trust in your own voice. You're like, well, I guess I better try it. I guess I better let them blah, 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 blah. I guess I better. Everything in you is telling you no. So honestly, you can always start now. You can always start now. Apologize and say, I didn't know this. So I said some things when I didn't know better. I did some things when I didn't know better. And forgiving yourself, right? And moving forward. And being a model. And being able to catch yourself, right? Yeah. So functional depression is the second thing that we talked about. High functioning depression it's often called high functioning depression or persistent depression. It's a form of depression where you appear well adjusted, but you're struggling on the inside with sadness, emptiness, exhaustion. Okay? It presents itself as chronic fatigue. It presents itself as emotional numbness disguised as being strong. Right? It presents itself as irritability as your baseline. You just walking around irritable all the time. Self-isolation in plain sight, not wanting to do anything, not wanting to go out, not engaging, dissociating. It presents itself as using success as a coping mechanism. High-functioning depression does. Moving from project to project, successful thing to successful thing, or achievement after achievement. It presents itself in somatic ways, headaches, stomach aches, back pain, muscle tension, cardiovascular issues, high blood pressure, right? I'm afraid of the risks of being spontaneous from my childhood, being so structured. Yes. So you know what, Green Lady? The ways that we can remedy that is to start small. Start small with being spontaneous. Start small and safe. I always tell my clients, start with something that's not life-threatening. Start with like, yeah, I plan to cook today, but you know what? I'm going to go to Chipotle. Start small. And then see yourself be okay. See yourself be fine. See yourself be able to keep yourself safe and continue to build on that. Spontaneous. You're at lunch. Oh my God, this happened to me for real, Green Lady. I was training. I used to bodybuild, right, y'all? So I'm a very rigid person at times, very structured too. So when I say I'm going to bring my lunch and I say I have something for lunch, I'm sticking to that and that's what I'm eating. Okay? Nope, I'm not going out to eat with you. Nope, I'm not going out. I'm going to eat this salad and this sweet potato that I bought today. So one day, my coworker came in. He was like, let's go get something to eat. And at first I was like, no, I brought my food. And something said, say yes. So that was spontaneous for me. And that was kind of like my own exposure therapy. So I could have gone in my head about how I brought my food and I wasted my money and all of this stuff. But I said, you know what? I'm used to being really rigid and really kind of structured in certain things. So I'm going to say yes today. And I'm going to go eat lunch. Who is it hurting? Who is it hurting if you don't eat that salad and sweet potato? What do you gain by going to socialize with your coworker? You bond more. You get out of the office. You don't work through your lunch, right? So I said yes. So that was my own little way of doing exposure therapy on myself to combat and confront my rigidity, my fear of being spontaneous. Because a lot of times we're just trying to maintain control. That structure just helps us feel safe and like we're closed in and protected. So sometimes we need to show ourselves, see, if you do that, you're still safe and protected. So sometimes we need to allow ourselves opportunities to say yes to some things. You know what? I was going to sleep in today, but you know what? I'm gonna get up and go hiking. Or I was gonna go hiking because I have to. I'm gonna allow myself to sleep in. So it can work both ways. Being spontaneous and just allowing yourself to do something small that has minimal consequences and not life or death is the way that you begin to combat that. Okay. Even when I go to eat, I order the exact same thing. Just one, I'll tell you, one little bitty small change in what you order. One little bitty small change. Start small. If you usually order a burger, fries, and a side salad, order burger, fries, and a soup. Something just real small. You don't even have to change up your whole order, right? And see what happens. It's just that little bit. It's just that little bit that keeps exposing you. So we talk about coping skills. We oftentimes think that coping has to look like astronomical. It needs to be something that we do like earth-shattering. It can be something very, very small. Very, very small, right? Very small. Hey, Truth TWS, it's okay. So that's how it presents. And we struggle to name depression because of the things that we've learned in our communities around depression being weak, or depression being something that you shouldn't experience, depression being something that's the antithesis or opposite of having faith and praying, all of that stuff, right? And we are afraid to name depression because of stigma. But the way that we're going to move towards healing is we're going to reclaim mental wellness as our birthright. We deserve to be well. We were born to be well. Okay? Challenge harmful narratives that exist within our culture, even the things that we repeat back to ourselves. Right? Oh, she's not depressed. She just spoiled. It sounds like what we say sometimes, right? She's not depressed. She just spoiled. Maybe she's depressed. Ask more questions. Absolutely it can, Shaka. Absolutely can come from childhood. Addressing medical mistrust, building mental health accessibility, advocating for that, educating future generations that it's okay to feel feelings and it's okay to rest. And this is our path towards liberation and resistance, right? So that's just me summing up the class, okay? I appreciate y'all for being here. This was our first class, y'all. We got 5 more. So we have class on Monday evenings at 7:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. And we're going to meet here next Monday, okay? So if there's anything that I feel like I need to add, I may show it throughout the week or post it on my stories throughout the week or my feed if there's anything that I come across. But this is what class is going to consist of. What time is it? It's 10 o'clock. I said 90 minutes, didn't I? And we're right on target. Look at that. So next week, y'all, we're going to be talking about, let me see. I have to get to it. Okay. Let me go back here. I want to tell y'all what we're going to talk about next week to pull up my syllabus. That's not it either. Okay, I have it. You're so welcome. I appreciate y'all for being here. Next week, we're going to talk about childhood trauma and generational cycles. So this was just your intro. I know we covered a lot, but this was just the intro. Each one of these are going to have their own session. So somebody who, I think that was Shaka, who asked childhood trauma and generational cycles. We're going to be talking about that and talking about how depression happens. What I want y'all to read for the next time, I at least want you to read the first 3 chapters of The Body Keeps the Score. You can listen to it on Audible, or you can listen to it however you listen to your books. The Body Keeps the Score. Okay? The Body Keeps the Score. I'm currently reading this now. It's some good stuff in here. What did he say earlier when I was looking? I'm going to have to find these clips and share them with y'all. But I would love for you to read this to get an understanding of how trauma is stored in your body. And you can read the first 2 chapters of It Didn't Start With You as well. It talks about epigenetics that I was talking about. Okay? Such a good book. Just such a good book, right? And so I'll be pulling excerpts from these as well, especially for next week, talking about childhood trauma and generational cycles. Okay? I appreciate y'all. I'm glad this resonates with so many of you. Somebody put this as a suggestion that somebody needs to teach trauma, depression, and coping skills. It was not, I can't take credit for it, but I was like, nobody's teaching trauma. I'm going to teach it. Okay. So I appreciate y'all being here. I feel like I was called to do this for whatever reason. And this is the way we're going to help each other. Okay. Okay. So that's it for tonight. Here's how I want you to take care of yourself. Oh. Every class ends with some homework. Hello. Every class ends with some homework. Outside of reading those things, I want you to think about what you learned today. Tag me if you feel like it. Share with your people. This is a collective effort, y'all. I'm going to try, Ty, to get this put on replay. This is a collective effort. When I say collective, we're learning so that we can disperse this amongst our community. So I want you to share what you learned. Share an aha moment. You can tag me in it. You can share it to your stories. You can share it in offline. But share it. Tell somebody what you learned. Pass it on, okay? Tell somebody that could help. It could help somebody get the light bulb moment that you had as well. Replay on Facebook. Would love to share with the family. I got to figure out how to do that, VC. This is my first time going live on TikTok, so I got to figure this out. But if you want to do a journaling exercise for my people who like to journal, I want you to think about what are the things that you are expecting from this course? What would you like to see? What would you like to learn? What are the things you would like to be your personal goals throughout this course? Remember, this one of the reading materials is also my therapy cards. These are the therapy cards that I created. There's also a journal prompt on here that you can do as well. What advice would you give to your younger self? You can do that journal prompt now. You can do it next week. Okay? So remember, the body keeps the score. It didn't start with you. Or you can simply grab a My Therapy Cards deck. These are the cards that I created to help us out with journaling. So there's a women's deck. This is the relationship deck. There's a men's deck and a teens deck. You can do prompts there, right? And this is one that I pulled for this class specifically. What advice would you give to your younger self? Knowing what you know now. Thank you, Just Blessed. Now, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to your younger self? You can actually do that. Okay. What's the name of the book? The Body Keeps the Score. Yep. The Body Keeps the Score. Okay. The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And it didn't start with you. Okay. It didn't start with you. Okay. Thank you, Keisha. I appreciate that. It didn't start with you by Mark Wolin. Okay. And the therapy cards can be found using the link in my bio, okay? And so they're filled with prompts if you want to do them for yourself, if you want to do them with your partner, with your children, for those people with kids, with teens, or just have some things that you can reflect on, okay? But next week, come prepared to talk about childhood trauma and generational cycles. Now, we talked about a lot. It may have stirred up some stuff in many of you. What I'm going to ask you to do is take some deep breaths, ground yourself to where you are, orient yourself back to your room where you are, orient yourself to where you're sitting. Go get some water. Go drink some water. You can drink whatever else you want to drink, but make sure you drink some water. Water is healing, y'all. Water flushes, water restores. Okay? So when we put hydration back in our body, it also helps us with our mood and the emotional things we are experiencing. The less hydrated we are, the more anxious we are. Okay? Go hydrate. Y'all have a good night. And I'll see y'all back here next time, okay? Bye, y'all. And I'm going to figure out how to work and get this replay. Okay?